Okay, I think that puts us at 11:05, so we'll get started. I think I'm going to close down this shared screen so that we can see Kelly and Dave. So thanks for taking the time, guys, to be here with us and talk about some of what you've been seeing. The impetus for this 20 questions program was really that we were having conversations with so many people around the industry, our sponsors and members, and what I've found is that this is, not being able to go into work and see people every single day has made it so that it's really more important to really intentionally do a temperature check and talk to people. And I think you guys are going to be talking about that a little bit. So in Calgary, John Fisher and Greg Kwong had done a really successful 20 questions event as a webinar, and we thought we'd steal that format exactly and try it out. So thanks everybody for coming to our first online event at NAIOP Edmonton, our 20 questions, and I'll hand it off to Kelly to get us started off.
Thanks, Anand. Good morning to everyone. First and foremost, interesting way to be doing these nowadays, but I think based on the number of people that we have attending, obviously there's a desire for some interaction in our industry, and I can't think of a better guy to sit down and do 20 questions with than Mr. Young, who's had a long and storied career in our industry in Edmonton. Is a go-to for many people in this city with respect to real estate questions and what's happening in our market. So Dave, welcome and thank you for agreeing to do this. Good morning to you.
My pleasure, Kelly, and good morning to everybody on the line. And thanks for joining us. This is a great communication tool, and look forward to the next hour or so.
Awesome. We'll jump right in. Dave, maybe tell us a little bit about your career and its path. What drew you to real estate, and where your road was that led you to CBRE?
Well, it's interesting. Last night, everybody probably saw the Premier talk about a potential May 14th re-entry to our economy, and May 14th will be my 30th anniversary in this business. So it's quite apropos that that's the date. It's kind of fun. But I really fell into this industry, Kelly. Back in 1990, when I graduated, there was very little going on, and we'll get into why I think today is similar to the early 90s. And there was very few jobs available. And I applied to a job as a retail lease assistant at Knowlton Realty. No idea really what it was. I had some friends that were working at the time for Graham Young and moving to Toronto to work for some banks. I didn't want to do that. And I applied, and lo and behold, I got the job. And I worked for a guy named David Forbes at Knowlton. And David's one of my best friends and one of my mentors. So I kind of fell into it. But at the time, there was this huge opportunity that I saw in front of me to get into an industry that, one, the harder you work, the more money you made. And it was just that. It wasn't through school. It wasn't through, David Dale Johnson's course, which I think the kids are so lucky to have right now, getting through the business program. It was, one, there's not a ton of jobs, so it's very similar to today. And two, the only opportunity that was there. So, and I wanted to stay in Edmonton at the time, given family reasons. And I worked at Knowlton until about 1995. When Forbes and Barris left in 93 to start CB in Calgary, I stuck it out in Edmonton. And in 95, David called me and said, what do you think? Do you think you'd like to open up the CB, at the time, commercial office in Edmonton? And at that time I was 26 or 27 years old. And I said, yeah, that'd be an awesome opportunity. So left Knowlton after it had just been sold to Terode. There was a bit of a difference in business philosophy there. And started the office on the 10th floor of Manulife Place in Todd Phillips's business center. Louise Fedoruk and I started, and then shortly thereafter, Simkin, Hughes, Mayman, Menon, at the time Rod Mosher joined, and that was 1995, and we've just continued to grow that business and that brand in the city and the province and the prairies for that matter since then. So I've been very fortunate to fall in an industry with some great people, and then be able to surround myself with great partners that makes my job unbelievably satisfying.
Excellent. Yeah, kind of a fall into it type of story, eh?
No, and I know a lot of guys. I think there's only a few left. Todd Fronson at Avison and Calgary, and Dursling was, I think at Terode at the time, or he might have been at Roycom. So there's a lot of us that have grown up in this business in this city.
Interesting. What would you say are some of the key traits that individuals need or should focus on developing with respect to being successful in our industry?
Well, I think in any business, I think your values, your ethics, your morals are the key. How you've been brought up and how you respect people around you. I worked for a gentleman named Gerald Knowlton, and Gerald, for some of you on the phone may know, but Gerald was really the grandfather of commercial agency in Canada, for that matter. And you've seen companies spun out of Knowlton Realty, Graham Young and Associates, Avison out of Toronto. They're all ex-Knowlton. And what he also said to me is to be a good listener. You got 2 ears and 1 mouth, use them in that order. Those were things that he'd say to you. And he gave trust to young people that had good work ethic. People always say, well, you can work smarter. My opinion is you work harder. You will get smarter as time goes on, but you got to put that time in. I always say, if I make 100 calls and you make 50, Kelly, and you might be way smarter than I, but if I'm making twice as many calls, I'm going to do twice as many deals as you. So I think that hard work and work ethic is extremely important. But that listening piece is stuck with me. It's 2 ears, 1 mouth. Use them in that order.
Well, I'll only claim to be smarter than you when you're not in the room.
Well, if you're the other thing somebody said to me, if you think you're the smartest person in the room, find another room, because that's I think that's a problem that you get into some groupthink. I think you need to also be prepared to work with others, and with in a team environment. You're going to leverage a lot of people, and having that ability to bring in new partners, junior, senior, intermediate. I think those are keys to everybody's success. And then the last thing I think is, and everybody on the line's heard time management, but I'm pretty religious in terms of my days. I got A, B, and C time. My guy, if there's any of my team on the phone, they've heard me say this, probably tired of it, but 8:30 to 11:30, that's A time. Noon, you can have lunch, you can do some 1:30 to 3:30, 4:30, that's A time. Don't bother me at A time. That's when we need to produce. So I think being very, very conscious of your day and being able to manage your time properly, because really in my business, in our brokerage business, it's really all we've got is time. So you got to manage it so you don't waste it. So those are things I think you need to really focus on to be successful in this fast-paced business.
Well, I would certainly say that right now, given what we're dealing with, time management is maybe more key than it's been in quite some time. As a leader of a large team, what are the things that you're doing to make sure your team is staying engaged, which can be a challenge in this work from home atmosphere we're dealing with right now?
Yeah, and it is. And I think we all got a crash course and ramped up course in how to use Zoom and webinars and staying in touch. The days of old conference calls, I don't like them anymore, where you give the call-in number and you dial and you're talking on the telephone. I think the situation now is constant communication more than ever. We check in with our groups daily. We're making sure that the cameras are on, so we know who's brushed their hair and put on a clean shirt and don't have their hat on backwards, because this is work. What I find interesting is people saying we're going back to work. No, like we've been working for 7 weeks. It's just going to be where we're working from. So I think those are that's really important. That communication and this visual communication. It's a tool that we never used before, but we're very comfortable now. Sorry, go ahead.
Would you say there's specific things you're telling them now in this environment that you weren't necessarily before to keep them focused when they can't meet with their clients on a day-to-day basis, when they can't meet in the office and, bounce ideas off each other in this scenario?
Well, let's take a poke at the last question. I think, with the technology, be it Zoom or Teams, I can ring you up and I can have a face-to-face fairly quickly because everybody's got their phone. But the other thing I think is really important is continuing your rhythm in your day. And I had a hard time at the beginning. I'm a creature of habit. I get up in the morning, I go to work, I grab a coffee, used to grab it at Sonari's. Now it's just that way. You can now take 2 or 3 things that should take a couple hours, you can stretch it into a day, which is not right. I think you need to maintain your rhythm. If you've got a call with a client that happens every 2 weeks, make sure that call is happening now. And making sure you're always on, right? And there's a lot of things that we can be doing in these downtimes to build better databases, to build better mapping technology, work with research. So there should never be a downtime in your day today or right now. You may not be doing deals, you may not be talking to your clients regularly, but there's lots to do. As it relates to clients, landlords, tenants, investors, lenders, they need you more now than ever before in our business. And I think the sharing of information between various I call them helpers, lawyers, accountants, lenders, etc. Those people need you. So make sure you're making those calls and making those calls with purpose. And our teams are definitely do that. The other thing we've done to keep our teams busy is we've used this big national platform, and we've got asset class calls 3 times a week. So we're leveraging our platform to make sure our teams and our people in our various cities have access to information coming from other parts of the country and around the world. So we have really, really been very diligent in terms of ensuring our sales professionals as well as our admin and support have access to that training.
You find it are there certain individuals within your organization that you find it more challenging for them to be working out of the office, say your analyst team as an example, versus the agents themselves? Is there a specific group within the office that you think there's some different keys to them staying productive?
Yeah, I think from the brokers, this is, we're on telephone, we're actually starting to see some tours occur. So I don't want to say it's business as usual, but it's closer than, say, our deals admin team. Our deals administrator in Edmonton's awesome. She's quite busy right now, and she's got into a rhythm. I think where the challenges has been is maybe on our research team where there's not as much going on and keeping those folks motivated. But again, our admin teams have calls weekly to make sure everybody's got lots to do. I'm in touch with Annalise a couple times a week, just making sure we're updating what we have. So it's this constant communication because you can. And what I found, one thing's very interesting is that we have some single people that live in work in our office, and the social isolation, the mental piece has been a challenge. So making sure you're in front of those folks, even if it has nothing to do with business, just to make sure they're okay. I'm lucky. I've got my wife here. She may not think she's lucky. But I'm lucky to have my wife and my daughter here, and my son's still in Toronto. He didn't come home, but I think that piece where you didn't see anybody for a while. So I think it's imperative upon leadership to not just talk about deals and not just talk about business, but this has been a tough time for people, myself included, trying to figure out what we do next. So it's constant communication. I think that's going to get everybody through this.
I'd agree with that. It's important to stay connected where you can. There's a saying that's it's an older saying, never waste a good crisis. Yeah. What do you think? What's your perspective on our industry as we come out of COVID? And in the light of that thought on let's not waste a good crisis, where are the opportunities as we emerge back to business as usual, as we say?
Well, I think yesterday, again, the Premier's message yesterday, I think got everybody a bit more spring in their step this morning. I think nationally, we've started to change the dialogue. To your point, Kelly, we've got to start talking about what it looks like coming out of it. I think what's happened is this crisis has exacerbated some failures that were just going to happen anyway. Like you take the retail business, or even if you take some small bay industrial product, there were tenants before the pandemic that were hanging on. The economy wasn't extremely strong to begin with. So this pandemic has really showing us that, you know, strong balance sheet, good covenant, very important. So there's going to be failures, but in those failures, I think we're a little early yet. I think the fact that you can't get to court, you're not seeing a ton of foreclosures yet. Where we believe the opportunities will be in the medium term, we still like the industrial business extremely well to your business plan. But where I think the opportunities may be is it may be in retail, because that retail market's is been painted with a broad brush of it's all bad. It's not all bad. If you've got an unanchored center in a small market that should never been lent on, that's probably a trouble. But there will be some survivors here. And I think the winner, there's going to be an opportunity to retail price properly. And the other area I think is that we'll see is small bay industrial. We think there's going to be a bit of pain in the near term, just because we believe that B market, small bay, is very similar to B retail. It's small, mom-and-pop, independent type operators, maybe some oil field service. That's going to clean out. We think vacancies are going to come up, rents are going to come down, and I think there'll be buying opportunities. But I think we're a few months, 9 to 12 months away from seeing any significant opportunities. But those are two areas we're focused on.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think the part of, you know, the e-commerce wave that's been forced to increase right now, probably going to have some effect on the industrial side, maybe more in the short term. In the long term, we'll see if it gets more back to bricks and mortar normal as we move forward. But, you know, we've certainly been talking to groups that have seen increases during all of this in their business, as much as 30%.
Yeah.
So there's business to be done.
Just on that point though, Kelly, I think that, you know, what I think the world has understood is that a secure supply chain is imperative.
Crucial.
You know, you look at some of these 3PLs, there's going to be growth there. There's going to be more demand for distribution space at some time in the future. You start to see people moving manufacturing from China to Vietnam and Thailand, which was underway. It will continue. Will we see manufacturing in North America? Maybe we're not that productive here, but Mexico. And where are we? We're on the Canamex corridor as the north. I think north-south travel is going to be extremely important. So, you know, I think the industrial market probably will come out of this as the winner, followed closely by the multifamily sector.
So, given that, you know, we've talked about the length of your career a little earlier, you worked through the real estate recession in the 90s. How does this compare? Does it compare?
Listen, my comments this week, it's kind of feels like 93, 94, 95 to me. And it's amazing how quickly we've gone from a market where everything was kind of feeling pretty good. It wasn't great. It was feeling pretty good, to 7 weeks of, oh my God, 50% of potential retail tenants could fail on the private side. It's amazing how quickly that's the only change. But if I look at vacancies, if I look at price of oil back in the mid 90s, I look at interest, the only thing that's different is interest rates were 12, 13%, and they're 4 today, which I think is helping some of these challenge pieces of dirt and real estate. It feels like the 90s. I think the fact is, you know, we were flat then, we're flat now because there's no price discovery. But I also remember coming out of the 90s, the opportunities that were there for the private sector investor, private equity, et cetera. So that's kind of how I'm feeling right now. If we come out of the pandemic, which we will, I think the biggest thing we as Albertans need to figure out is how we operate in a low oil price environment for could be 18 to 36 months. And that's kind of getting me back to, you know, that comment about where the market is and how I feel.
Yeah. Well, and it's certainly for me, as much as COVID and the impact of COVID has been significant, I do believe the impact of COVID will be shorter to our market and our industry than the declining oil values. So, you know, in looking at that, what's going to be harder to get back? I would say it's going to be harder to get the oil industry back. Would you concur, or do you think COVID's probably?
I think there's a structural change that's occurring in energy. Gary Barris says there's a good cure for low oil prices, and it's low oil prices. So I think what will happen in the near term, we come out of the pandemic, demand for energy increases. People are driving, trucks are on the road, planes start to fly again, hotels open up. There's going to be a demand, but it's going to be it's going to be a long time before we get back to peak. I think the supply side has sorted itself out for the time being. So we were in the perfect storm, right? We had supply challenge, demand just got completely eliminated. But I do think that in the near to medium term, there's going to be a restructuring of that, and there will be some pain felt and a right sizing of the energy business. There's going to be some winners in this. There's going to be M&A work that's going to be done. The strong guys will get stronger, and the weak will disappear. It's very Darwinism.
Yeah. So on that front, how in this scenario of how we're dealing with this and the oil and gas challenges, how do you continue to expand your industry knowledge in this scenario where you're not in the office, you're not, you don't maybe have that walk across the hall to your analyst scenario with what's coming and the opportunities that we talked about? How do you make sure you stay on top of the pulse of what's going on?
Well, somebody asked me yesterday, what did I do? And I looked at my calendar and it was full of web calls. It was full of client calls, but also I think we're being able to take advantage of some very good pieces being put out by the law firms, the accounting firms, BOMA, NAIOP. I think the access to video learning has been great. Like we've been really pushing that internally. We've got a great an educational piece that CB's pushed out to our staff in terms of how to call in a closed-in environment, how to value, where's valuation going. And the other thing I think is most important is that there's been huge experience share within our firm. So when we get on a line with all our industrial guys, there may be 165 people on a web call like we're doing today, and we'll bring in the distribution leader from the United States. So what a great resource that we have internally. We'll bring in stats from what's going on in Asia to see how that market's going on. And I think our ability to do that has really helped our sales professionals and our non-sales staff sort of increase their knowledge of the business.
So from a brokerage perspective, what needs to be done, or who do you think is going to be the most resilient in these times?
Well, it's like every other business. Those with strong balance sheets will survive, and those with great information and depth will survive. I think the other thing is those that are in front of their clients regularly. Like this is not I don't know if I said it earlier, but going back to work, we've been working for 7 weeks, so it's kind of a funny thing that the people will be able to get back to work. I just think we'll be working in a different location. So I think those companies, and it doesn't matter what industry you're in, you need to be in front of your clients now more than ever. And those folks, I've had some calls from friends that are not in our business that are using this as a downtime. I'm going, no, this is the time where you make market share. This is the time that the cream rises up, and if you want to work harder now, you'll come out of this stronger. There will be some casualties across all industries: development industry, brokerage industry, retail industry, investor industry. But I think the way you deal with it, like you said, why waste a good crisis?
I would agree. The terminology of referring to it as getting back to work is probably not accurate. It's more of getting back to operations that we're used to. In that vein, as landlords and businesses, how do you see this reopening, we'll call it, getting back to an office environment? How does that impact public transit or something as simple as elevators in buildings? I know in our building we're limiting elevators to 3 people at a time at present. Staggered start times for staff, something you guys might entertain, or is it all in right back into it?
No, we're going to manage this properly. I think my personal risk is that we go whole hog and go back and we rebound. It's like a dead cat bounce right now, and I don't want that to happen. We are currently, because we're a big user, we're a big occupier of space, so we're thinking about how as a tenant we're going to get back here. And we're sort of talking about 50% occupancy when we can get back. We're looking at PPE equipment for our staff within the space. we're listening to our staff that may be concerned about getting on public transit and trying to get this social experiment about working from home. It can be done. Is it the best? Not in my mind, but it can be. So until we get a vaccine that works, the new normal is going to be, it might be 50%, it might be lower occupancy on the floor. We're lucky because once we're able to get out, our industrial team, and if there's other brokers on the phone, you're out touring buildings anyway. So if I look at my 7 or 8 people there, there's typically 4 cubes vacant anyway. So I think our sales organization, especially outside sales, would be probably easier. But I was asking our guys in downtown Toronto, like, if you've got your back of house people coming in on a subway from north part of the GTA, and you've seen those subways, there's no place to stand at 7:30 in the morning. Are you going to want to get on it? I'm also curious. I haven't heard from Manulife yet about staggered entry times for the building. We've got Enbridge as a big tenant in our bank. Are they going to call the shots? I don't know yet. So it's a real challenge, but I don't see it changing. Our opinion is it'll get easier, but until that vaccine exists, it'll be staggered work times and 50%. We're calling Team CB and Team RE, and if depending on where you are on the logo, will be the days that you come into the office. So, but the nice thing is we're talking about it now.
Yeah, that's true. We had a question submitted on the Q&A with respect to aspects of the business that had adapted through this process. We've learned some things about our industry. How do you think it's going to affect us, learning what we can now do without, so to speak? Groups may be becoming more lean, there have been some that have downsized, there have been others that have not. How do you think this is going to affect our industry on the other side of this?
Well, I think the use of technology has really made, I'm usually somewhere else once a week, a month. Does this impact my travel schedule? Maybe. I still think that this is a great forum to have calls and presentations and so forth, but nothing beats face-to-face. So I do think the use in the access to good technology will eliminate some of that business travel. Are you going to lean out? Can you do more with less? I've actually hired 2 people in the pandemic. I kept my summer student on because I need to do things. We hired another trainee because I think coming out of this, I don't want to be caught without the right people. What I do think is going to come out of this is that the real estate industry is going to have more choice. There's going to be a better employee base for us in Alberta as business leaders and business owners to select from. I think the quality of the employee we're going to see on the other end will be great. Will office space be used differently? Yes, it will be. I think the pendulum will swing way too far one way to say, we don't need all this space, but the space we need, we don't need to go down to 1 per 110, we need 1 per 150. So where does that sort of end up? You less people in the office, but those in the office needing more space, if you know what I mean. So this is something nobody on the planet has ever done. So we're going to learn through this. But the key to our business is good people are always needed, and you need good people to grow your market share. So I don't know how much leaner some companies can get in our space.
So in that vein, what have you learned about yourself during this?
What I've learned about myself is I knew I was, but it's enforced me. I need structure, and this has taught me how to structure my days even tighter and more effectively than before. I thought I was pretty efficient at the office. I'm way more efficient now, even dealing with stuff that needs to be dealt with from an administrative perspective. I think we use our time better now. We've got and that's really what, and I think people in our offices have seen that as well. The other thing I've learned is there's a lot of stuff I thought was really important. It is not very important anymore. Health, wellness of your family, having dinner with my daughter and my wife every night, that's kind of cool. So how does that change the work environment?
Yeah.
I think what's also happened, what I've learned of others, is that if you've got a good team around you, business carries on. And I think that's going to be the, you got good people, like I said before, you will succeed.
You've referenced a couple of times the better use of technology that this has forced upon all of us. Is that one of the main things that you hope to see stick moving forward out of all of this, or is there anything else that's key?
Well, technology for sure. And I'm if you talk to the folks in my office, I think the only Greg Mayman is worse than me with the use of technology. So I've learned a lot of this. But what I hope also sticks is the communication. I think we've communicated as an industry, as human beings, better now than we have in the past. And I look at my company, and when we can get our industrial team across the country once a week for 45 minutes to share experiences, I hope that stays. But again, it's with the advent of this Zoom technology, we can do it. So I guess as a takeaway, that from technology leads to better communication.
I do have one more question for you, but I'm just going to see if there's any questions from our audience at this point that anyone wants to ask of Dave. Whether you want to type it into the chat or if you want to do it live chat and chime in. Were there any questions from the attendees for Dave that we haven't talked about today? Doesn't sound like it.
Just like being in, David Dale Johnson would know this because none of his kids ask him any questions either.
So one last question for you. Can you give us a person that you feel's had a tremendous impact on you as a leader, maybe someone that was a mentor to you or had a pretty big impact on you in your career or personally in your times in the industry?
Yeah, no, and I think mentorship is important. And when I first got in the business, I mentioned Forbes. And for those of you maybe on the phone that know him, he's a pretty energetic individual. He always treated me as a partner, not an assistant or a junior guy. So I take a lot of that. And if you hear me speak about our teams, it's always partners. So that mentorship and the way he treated me as a 22-year-old coming out of school, it was amazing. Gary Barris, so the two founding partners of CB, Forbes and Barris. Barris taught me a lot. He taught me about humility. He taught me about hard work. He taught me about structure. He taught me how to run a P&L because Forbes had no idea about profit and loss. He just wanted to do deals. So Gary helped me with a lot in the early days, actually setting up the operation, and he's still a great partner today. And I talked about Gerald Knowlton. He was a guy that scared the daylights out of me when it came to do applicant reports every month. And at that time, he had a piece of paper, and he talked about what's going on, and he'd grab you and say, are you a man or a mouse? And he said some things. That 2 ears, one mouth sticks with me to today. And without those three people, I'm not what I am today.
A couple questions have popped up. Bronwyn's asking for industry secrets for a fellow broker. Let me answer that for Dave. Join CBRE. David Dale Johnson actually chimed in and wondered if you could speak a little bit more on office space demand and the many comments that there'll be more work from home out of this. Do you see that as continuing or a trend that'll come through?
Yeah, I think it's something that I said it's a social experiment this last 7 weeks for everybody on the planet, and it's accelerated some people's access to technology. And I think, David, it's going to swing too far too quickly, and we'll be back to a norm because our opinion is yes, we can do more mobilely, but there's something about human interaction and culture that sales organizations such as ours need, and you need that interaction. It's great to have these Zoom calls and Zoom pub nights, and Kwong's done a great job in putting together comedians every Friday, but it's not the same as going out and sitting with your teammates and your partners and the balance of the office and actually seeing people. So I think in the near term, there'll be, until there's a vaccine, yes, there'll be more mobile workforce and a change in use of office space. But the human psyche, I think, people will want to get back to an environment that works. And my personal opinion is the productivity in Canada and the United States is not great to begin with. I think limiting structure for many people probably reduces that. So that's a concern of a mobile workforce in my mind.
One last question before I turn it back to Anand here. What's the most memorable deal you've done in your career?
Well, memorable deal. Actually, we just did it last year and we sold. We were very fortunate to work for Oxford in the disposition of Edmonton City Centre. And I'm laughing here because it was a deal that took a long time, and I can't remember how many thousands of emails we had, and how many challenges, and the discussions we had, and it went from up to down to done to not done, the Germans coming back, the Germans needing this, the Germans needing that. It was so intellectually stimulating. Forget about the math, but just about how it all came together at the end over time, and to see how different people operate in stressful situations. That was an absolutely pressure cooker. And our team, and taught to Chibri's credit, he was the guy that stick handled that. So to see a young person like that able to operate in that environment is spectacular.
Awesome. Well, Dave, everyone appreciates the time today. I certainly do. Always good to get to talk to you and listen to your expertise and your ideas. I will turn it back over to Anand and let him wrap this up for us.
Well, yeah. Thanks, Kelly, for doing the interview. These are meant to be 45 minutes, and I think we're going to be doing a bunch more. I know that I think next week we'll be advertising starting on Monday. Next week we might have Matt Woolsey do one. So Dave and Kelly, thanks so much for kicking it off. I want to thank our sponsors, Panattoni, Quadrille, Qualico, and Remington, our top sponsors. I really agree with Dave. I think this crisis kind of gives us the opportunity to see who's really providing value and to kind of just give some folks the opportunity to differentiate. So I think that NAIOP is doing just a really excellent job. Of course, I think that I work here, but we're advocating in areas that we've never advocated before. So I just wanted to just talk about for a minute. Yesterday, the city of Edmonton announced an overall property tax decrease for non-residential businesses, buried in the news of reopening, which we've also been a part of those discussions at the provincial level. The municipalities are working hard on how to bounce back and recover, and that's partly based on our advocacy efforts. And we're also, you may see us in the news. I think we're in the Edmonton Journal today. And maybe Global Edmonton and several others in the next few days talking about the federal rent relief program, which we could have spent a whole hour on today, but just some of the ways that we can improve that program to make sure that it works for the most number of businesses and works for landlords and tenants is a major push. And so we'll be working with our NAIOP chapters around Canada as well as here in Alberta to advance some of that. So I also wanted to thank our President's Club sponsors, Bentall Green Oak, One Properties, Pangham, Avis & Young, Ledcor, and Melcor, and our developing leader sponsor, Cameron Developments. You can see in the chat, we talked a little bit about the free courses that NAIOP's offering online right now. And so take advantage of those while we have a little bit of time at home and we're saving a bit of time on the commute. And we'll hopefully see you here for the next one of these 20 questions events. Thanks very much, guys. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Anand.
Thanks again, Dave.
Be safe, everybody.
Take care.